The secret behind awesome recovery is a doctor who is simply extraordinary. I would take the privilege to introduce Professor Dr. Poovalagi ma'am, our IMCU chief, who's well known for her dedication towards work. Ma'am's caring manner is a credit to the medical profession, truly a lifesaver. We welcome you, ma'am.
A very good evening, one and all. So I think the next 30 minutes, I'll be talking about one of the common problems which you have handled in your units and ICU. Is there anyone here who has not yet seen or handled a child with decay just before I start my session? Anybody here who has not seen or handled a child with decay? So that makes my job easier. Okay. So I'll just deal with the definition, how to correct shock and dehydration, therapy, monitoring, complications, precipitating events, and what's going on around the latest in decay. There's a common scenario you will see. I will start with this scenario. So you have a child coming with history of vomiting, lethargy, and abdominal pain. Very typical. Not uncommonly, we have missed this as an acute abdomen. Or probably a child in a season with dengue, afebrile, yes, acute abdomen, medical cause, yes. So think about this. A medical problem and a surgical problem will present with vomiting, lethargy, and abdominal pain. Now adding it to the COVID season, your MISC too. So you have a child here who's voice responsive, tachypneic, circulation status tachycardic, thready pulse, shock, normal BP. So this is a common scenario. Whatever be the diagnosis, you're going to achieve the physiological status first. So airway is maintained, respiratory rate tachypneic, work of breathing is normal. Any child who has fast breathing with no retractions, please think of a metabolic acidosis, whatever be the cause. Heart rate 160, pulse thready, CRT, prolonged cold extremities, 90, 56, okay for age. Despite all this, child is having an output 5 ml per kg. So a child who is presenting to you with shock, dehydration, voiding urine, please check the blood sugar. The next minute you get this history. Anybody with dehydration, voiding urine, you have few possibilities. The first thing will be DKA. Any other possibility? Dehydration, voiding urine in the emergency room? Yes, somebody? Renal RTA, yes, one. Anything else? Dehydrated, voiding urine? Loudly. Huh? One is DKA, the other one is renal tubular acidosis. Anywhere else? Voiding urine, dehydrated. Anywhere there is tubular dysfunction with hypokalemia, child will be voiding urine. So that will be the history. Child is voice responsive and dehydration. A word about dehydration. Children with DKA need not have signs of dehydration obviously seen outside. Why? But you assume everybody is dehydrated. Why? It is intracellular dehydration first and then proceeds for extracellular. So your sunken eye, your dehydration, skin, all that will come only when ECF is lost. So even if there are no signs of dehydration, if you think it's DKA coming to you with the signs for hospital, that is probably taken as maybe moderate to severe dehydration. So now your bedside clues, 476, urine ketones. Word on urine ketones, it's only useful for the initial diagnosis. Please don't go by urine ketones for monitoring. The ketones which are produced today will be excreted for up to 72 hours, sometimes even up to 5 to 7 days. That does not mean ketosis is ongoing. It's just ketonuria. It's being excreted for a longer period. So if you want to follow up for ketosis, get your blood ketones done, beta hydroxy. So what you are seeing in the urine is acetoacetate or acetoacetic acid. That is not going to give an idea about what is being formed as ketosis. So urine ketones is only for diagnosis, not for follow-up. Your bicarbs and your base excess. So this is a typical biochemical and clinical triad. Clinical triad comes with dehydration, fast breathing, and altered sensorium. This part is only DKA I am dealing about. So not all fast breathing, not all dehydration and coma is DKA. So a combination of any two means so many differential diagnoses. So probably your shock and dehydration with altered sensorium, diarrhea, sepsis, fast breathing with altered sensorium, any of these respiratory problems, sepsis, renal tubular acidosis, IEMs, And probably altered sensorium alone can be a part of too many metabolic problems and acute CNS infection. So please look into this triad of your clinically volume should be low, dehydrated, fast breathing in view of metabolic acidosis and altered sensorium. The biochemical triad, DKA, diabetes, ketosis, acidosis, yes, more than 200. Some books say 250, but don't worry, children always have the ranges as 500, 600. Acidosis 7.3 and 15, yes, even now. See, previously we had two guidelines, ISPAD and BSPD. Both were different, British and US guidelines, but now I think 2020, everything is almost the same, but for a few differences which I will talk to you later. So you have acidosis and again ketosis, recurrent vomiting. See, all these individually or in combination will have too many diagnoses. Just hyperglycemia without history of osmotic symptoms like polyuria, polydipsia. Please think about any problem wherever there is a volume loss, they will have stress hyperglycemia. Anybody with a seizure, head injury, all those children will have stress hyperglycemia. Without history of polyuria, polydipsia, think twice, thrice, 4 times before diagnosing DKA. Here again, acidosis is a part of sepsis, lactic acidosis, RTA, uremia or IEMs. Here again, you will have, child who is failing to thrive, very small infant, yes. And infancy, it's very common, very uncommon to have DKA. They present with diabetes or monogenic DMs. Ketosis, yes, recurrent vomiting, starvation or IEMs. Just a word on the pathogenesis. The problem begins with low insulin. So whenever there's no insulin, glucose gets accumulated. Osmotic effect of glucose, polyuria, volume loss, dehydration, energy loss, weight loss. Tissue glucose is very low because they are not able to utilize glucose in the absence of insulin. So you have the alternate metabolism, fatty acid breakdown, hypoxemia, metabolic acidosis, loss of all these fluids and electrolytes. And again, because of hypoxemia, you get lactic acidosis. The cycle goes on and on unless hypoinsulinemia is corrected. How to recognize DKA? Please go by the clinical triad, confirm with your biochemical triad. I think urine ketones everywhere now you have the dipsticks. Usually we used to do it in the side room labs. I think the trend of side room labs have gone now. So you have all the bedside tests. So probably you can get it done immediately. If you have your facility to do your bicarbs, it's easy. Never send a child where you're suspecting DKA. A walking child can have a pH of 7. So they'll be very compensated. So just because child is not acidotic, that doesn't mean the child is not really having a low bicarb or pH is low. So even a walking DKA can have a pH of 7. So please get your bicarbs or at least your pH before sending it out of the ER. Have your osmotic symptoms? Universal, 100% they will have. Only thing they will not attribute that symptoms, they will not volunteer. In winter, they say polyuria, polydipsia because the climate is like that, child is voiding urine. In summer, they say child is taking a lot of water, so it's voiding urine. So pediatricians, we are very happy as long as the child is voiding urine, immaterial of how much it is voiding. So polyuria and polyuria are different. Frequency is different from large volume. So large voluminous urine is what you have to specifically ask. The other clue will be recent onset nocturnal enuresis. Again, that's a diagnostic history. Osmotic symptoms, new onset nocturnal enuresis, genital candidiasis. You need to have a high degree of suspicion. Don't send any child who is sick for whom you don't have a diagnosis without a blood sugar. How to categorize mild, moderate, severe is the same according to ISPAD and BSPAD. Less than 7.3, 7.2, 7.1. Probably mild, moderate, severe. This is about the bicarb 15 to 5. Clinical signs, I said it may not be evident because it's intracellular dehydration. Later you may probably have, when somebody comes to you with obvious signs of dehydration, you know the child's loss will be 7.5 to 10% loss. Urine output will still be maintained, but child will present with shock. History ketingana, the mother will say, last voided urine just outside the emergency room or in the previous half an hour. Very, very unlikely in a dehydrated child. So please think of this. So all hospitalized children are considered to be dehydrated. A lot of clinical fallacies, they will have vomiting without loose stools because it's not diarrhea. Breathless without lung signs because it's a metabolic problem, metabolic acidosis. They'll be dehydrated but voiding urine because of the osmotic effect. Shock with no oliguria and anuria. They'll have a good appetite, still the mother will say weight loss. Lab fallacies, high total count. Don't jump and start the child on antibiotics because it's a part of stress response. So the counts will go down if you repeat after 2 to 3 hours into therapy. Elevated urea creatinine not always signifying AKI because it's pre-renal. Give some fluids, give a challenge, see for urine output. Acidosis, a condition that does not always need bicarb and DKA. Hyponatremia, please don't run behind the sodium numbers. You correct the sodium, then probably it is spurious because of the osmotic effect. Hyperkalemia will be there because of acidosis. The potassium will be shifted out to the cells, but total body potassium will be low. So please anticipate the child to go in for hypokalemia. There's polyuria, still you will not give any replacement of fluid. So don't run behind numbers for a child with DKA. Go by the clinical findings. ABC life support, I think I'll skip this. Shock and fluid therapy, what should be done, what should not be done. Insulin monitoring, identifying complications and precipitating factors. Investigations, you need to do a set of investigations for diagnosis. Blood ketones, yes. Beta hydroxy more than 3 millimoles per liter, yes, it's diagnostic. If it's not available, go by urine ketones. Identify the precipitating events with all this, your counts, a focus of infection. Please work up all the children with DKA for a focus of infection. Unless you control it, you will not get the metabolic control. Monitoring is depending upon your severity of DKA, you do it every hourly or blood sugars and clinical examination. All these are done usually 4th hourly. ECG until the child is on insulin, which is intravenous, and manage on osmolarity. Because you need to know how much it falls. If the child is shocked, give fluids. If there's no shock, please don't go on. Just because there is tachycardia, just because CRT is prolonged, don't push them on boluses. Cerebral edema, DKA, dengue, fluids are not always very safe. So please be very careful when you give fluids. If you have all findings for shock, then probably you give. Management is oxygen intravenous fluids, 10 to 20 ml per kg, 1 to 2 hours. If the child is hypotensive, you can rush even in 15 to 30 minutes. A bolus can be rushed as early as possible in any shock because hypotensive shock is going to arrest immediately if you don't correct it, immaterial of what the cause is. So if the child is having hypotension, do this very fast, maybe 10 or 20 ml in 15 to 30 minutes. If it is compensated shock, probably give it over 1 to 2 hours. Usually normal saline is given, not more than 40 ml per kilo. A child requiring more than 40 ml per kilo means, what is it? Child needs more than 40 ml per kilo in shock correction of DKA means what? Yes, suspect sepsis, it is not only DKA, something else, it's lactic, something else is acting on it. So if you need more than 40 ml, take on inotropes. Earlier we were saying at 30 ml, now you take it 40. Do not reduce the shock fluid correction because shock fluid correction is separate and your maintenance fluid is separate. If the child does not present with shock, probably you have to, If there's no shock, don't give any bolus of fluids. Start maintenance fluids. Start 10 ml per kg over 1 hour just to hydrate because your sugars will come down with your dehydration correction itself. So don't jump and start on insulin at the first hour. Delay insulin by 1 to 2 hours because once the volume hydration occurs, the sugars will fall by itself by 100 to 200 milligrams. Then you start them on insulin because you don't expect a rapid fall in the osmolality. When the blood sugar falls very fast, that causes osmotic disequilibrium and that will precipitate a cerebral edema. So don't be very, very hard and start on insulin at the onset. Wait for an hour or two, give some fluid hydration and then start them on insulin. If there is shock, correct shock, but don't reduce the fluids. If there's no shock, it's a part of maintenance fluids. 10 ml per kilo given over 1 hour and then continue the calculated fluid. And the correction is like, this is the correction you give, dehydration correction plus maintenance. Dehydration is corrected slowly over 48 hours. So assess the level of dehydration. If the child is in shock, it is 10%. Anybody coming to you, the hospital will be having anywhere between 7.5 to 10%. So assume that dehydration, if you do not know the weight, you roughly take it as 7.5 if there is no shock, 10% if there is shock. So 100 ml per kg, so probably 10% shock. If the child is in shock, dehydration is taken as 10%, deficit will be 100 ml per kg given over 48 hours. For a 20 kilo child, that will come to 2000 ml, 48 hours is roughly 42 ml per hour. This is the dehydration or the deficit correction. Maintenance, I think you all know Halliday formula. All the recommendations now use Halliday formula. Earlier, BSPED, British guidelines gave a lesser fluid, now you give the same amount. So for a maintenance fluid for a 20 kilo child, according to Halliday formula, will be 60 ml per hour. So add up both, this will be 1 or 2 ml. This is the fluid calculation you give. If you have not had shock, probably reduce whatever the 200 ml you have given initially. Otherwise, probably you just calculate it fully and give it off. So fluid therapy, yes, the Pecan trial has proved beyond doubt that you can give anything you want. Either you give normal saline or half normal saline, you give it rapidly or you give it slowly, does not do anything with the mortality, does not precipitate a CNS outcome also. So you can use either half normal saline or normal saline. Plasma-Lyte is also being used in some centers, though we don't use it. So after shock correction, probably for 48 hours. So use the fluid normal saline. A word on potassium, child will have hyperkalemia because it's acidose which is pushed out of the cells. So if the child has more than 5.5, withhold potassium for the first few hours. Otherwise, please add potassium to the maintenance fluids. If they come with normal potassium with acidosis, be very, very careful. The moment you start them on insulin, they will go for hypokalemia. tubular unresponsiveness, and there will be continued fluid loss. Your dehydration will not get corrected. Acidose will get worsened. So please be very careful when you want to give. So always use potassium prudently, monitor with ECG whenever somebody is on insulin. So you continue these fluids until child starts taking orally. If the child starts taking within 10 hours, fine, you can stop immediately. Or if it is prolonged for 48 hours, continue. Just because you have calculated for 48 hours, do not continue the fluids for 48 hours. As long as the child is clinically stable, biochemically stable, you can start them on oral. So add 5% dextrose containing fluids. Try to maintain your blood glucose between 200 to 250 or 200 to 300 as long as the child is on insulin infusion. Because as you are giving insulin, the rate of fall of blood glucose will be around 100 milligrams per dl. So if you keep it very tight at 200 or 150, the next hour it will go in for hypoglycemia. Children with diabetes can develop symptoms of hypoglycemia at a much higher level because their blood sugar is very high. Even at 200 they may. The rapid fall in the blood glucose will precipitate hypoglycemic symptoms. Once they develop hypoglycemia, they will be unaware. The symptoms will not be there for the subsequent hypoglycemia. Sympathetic outflow will not be there. They will not have tachycardia, sweating and things like that. So they will be silently going into hypoglycemia. So try to avoid hypoglycemia as long as you treat them with insulin infusion. So maintain it between 200 to 300. It is safer. Even 1 hour if you miss, it will go down to 100, not to a range for 60 or 70 where the child will have hypoglycemia. It's not unusual to see them even at 120 you may have hypoglycemic symptoms. From 300 if your blood sugar falls to 120, child definitely will have jitteriness. So please don't have a rapid fall. So have a periodic fall. So you probably have 90 to 100 milligrams or 80 to 100 milligrams per hour. When do you stop IV fluids? Once the child takes oral. See, it's not very uncommon to see children with 6.8 and 6.9. Within 6 hours, they'll get up and sit on the cot and ask for food in the middle of the night. They'll ask for water in the middle of the night. You know, that's the most valuable thing which you can have as a pediatrician. Child who's very sick at 6 o'clock in the evening, at 2 o'clock in the morning, getting up and sitting on the bed and asking for food. The very nice sign that you have treated the child properly. Yes. So asking for water is not a good sign in ICU. But if this child asks for water, don't think the other way and start intubating, right? So asking for water and food within 6 to 7 hours is one of the diseases. It's very, very rewarding for you. So whenever this child starts taking orally, you can stop the fluids. You don't commonly have type 1 diabetics coming to you with obesity. But if you have a child with obesity, what do? Please calculate for whichever is the lowest weight, the expected weight of the child. Please weigh the child. Don't have an approximate weight. If possible, weigh them. At least otherwise you take the expected weight of the child if obese, but never exceed 80 kg. If the child is more than that, the best thing would be 97th percentile for the age and sex. That is the best thing and that will be the lowest. So you take that as a weight if you do not know the weight or a sick child you are not able to weigh and calculate fluids accordingly. Do not give them. Similarly for boluses. A 40 kg child vandiruchina or 800 ml போட்டு push பண்ணாதீங்க. Because as long as there is acidosis, your myocardium is also going to be affected. So don't push them 20 ml per kilo as a guideline. 15 minutes, 800 ml pushed off. Then your liver will increase, your tachycardia will worsen and you will have to intubate and dehydrate later. So do not bolus fluids so rapidly. When to stop fluids? Yes, clinical and lab-wise, no acidosis. Tolerating fluids without nausea. Sometimes they'll be fussy in ICU, children will not take. For them, you just maintain some IV fluids so that your blood glucose is between 200 to 300. There is no hard and fast rule to taper and stop. Child is taking orally, you can abruptly stop the fluids. If you think the child is little fussy, you can probably reduce the fluids to 50% or 30% and monitor the blood glucose. Try to maintain your blood glucose between 200 to 300. Yes, next insulin. Wait for 1 to 2 hours to start for insulin. After rehydration, correction of shock, you start them on insulin. If your shock is not getting corrected after 2 or 3 hours, don't keep waiting to correct shock for 6 to 8 hours and delay insulin. Maybe the first 2 to 3 hours will be priority. By then, start them on inotropes. Then probably you start them on insulin. And the earlier you start, I said for the same reason, the rapid fall in the blood glucose will precipitate a cerebral edema. Preparation of insulin, I think all of you know, it's an art. You cannot just like that mix insulin and give it and then say sugar is not falling. So insulin has to be given meticulously prepared because insulin will bind to the plastic tubings. So if you don't flush it properly, insulin will not be delivered to the child. And the dose which you are giving 0.05 units or 0.1 unit per kg will never get delivered. For a 20 kilo child, if you keep it at 2 ml per hour, and if the insulin is not delivered, if you don't flush the line, then for next few hours, the insulin will not get delivered and naturally your blood glucose won't go down, acidosis will become bad, child will become go in for cerebral edema. So always prepare insulin infusion in such a way, you prime the tubing, like your 50 ml syringe, you load it first, add insulin, then connect your tubings, flush it out, and then probably connect it to a 3-way and give it. Don't just like that start it and put a big plaster, because 2 ml under the plaster, you won't know whether it is delivering. Put a 3-way in the main line and then start it. If it extravasates, it's easy to identify easier. So I think this is what I said. And always, before starting insulin, verify your potassium is at least 2.5 to 3 millimoles. When somebody is hypokalemic, don't start on insulin. Correct the hypokalemia and then start on insulin. Monitor with an ECG. The now current recommendation, you can give 0.05 units per kilo to 0.1 unit. Safer to start at a lower dose. The outcome is equal. But in children less than 5 years, always prefer to give a lower dose of 0.05 units per kilo per hour. How to titrate? Rarely you need to titrate insulin, because you maintain at 0.05 or 0.1 and then you alter your fluids depending upon the acidosis. Majority of the children will tolerate. If they develop renal failure, you may need to go down insulin. Very rarely they may require a hiking up of insulin dose, which means you are already in trouble. Either the child has already developed renal failure or not excreting your glucose, or the child has fulminant sepsis with counter-regulatory hormones, you need to give more dose. So you maintain the blood sugars in such a way around 200 to 300. So when you titrate insulin, by then if acidosis is corrected, the first thing to come down is blood glucose, then probably acidosis. So if the acidosis persists, to maintain the blood glucose, you need to probably increase the dextrose content rather than reducing insulin. So don't reduce insulin beyond 0.05, because you need to have a minimum level to prevent ketosis. Unless ketosis is prevented, your acidosis is not going to get corrected. So don't reduce your blood sugar, don't reduce your insulin once the sugars come down. Check on acidosis. If acidosis is also coming down, you're on the right track, reduce insulin. If acidosis is persistent, please don't reduce insulin. Try to increase the glucose content to maintain the blood glucose. So increase of insulin is rarely warranted. If you need to increase insulin, be careful. You are going to get hypoglycemia in the next few hours. Identify why you need more insulin. Either it is sepsis or developing AKI. Both will be problematic in ICU. Criteria for resolution. When do you say DKA is resolved? Because you want to shift your insulin to subcutaneous. Blood ketones less than 1 millimoles. Anion gaps should become normal. Be careful when you take pH, because when you give normal saline, there will be hyperchloremic acidosis. So your pH alone being low is not a criteria. Your anion gaps should narrow down. Normal anion gap acidosis, don't worry, it's hyperchloremia. You can still change over to subcutaneous. If you have a bicarb, if you have none of this, clinically a stable child, that's the time you can go down. Please don't rely on urine ketones and blood sugar to decide on changeover of subcutaneous insulin. How to stop overlap? Yes, because the moment you give subcutaneous insulin, regular insulin will need an hour, 1 hour, because it is a monomer. You need to get converted into monomers. But if you use the newer rapid acting analogs, then probably immediately within 15 minutes, you need no more overlap time. So if you want to stop or insulin to subcutaneous, the subcutaneous insulin has to be given, and insulin infusion has to run for the overlap time, which is depending upon what insulin you start. If you start on regular insulin, it is probably 1 hour. On rapid insulin, probably it is 15 minutes. So what dose you start with? Previously, whatever dose it was in a known child. If it's a new child, according to the weights. See, if it's an adolescent, it may need 1 unit per kilo. If it's a pre-adolescent, probably 0.75. Probably if it is less than 5 years, you need 0.3 to 0.5 units per kg. So this is per day. And please, whenever you shift over to subcutaneous, don't meticulously write 8th hourly. You will give at some odd time, and child will take food at some odd time. So always put it as pre-meal. Majority of your doses will be in the day and night. Child may not get any dose because not much of activity. So be careful. Role of subcutaneous insulin, yes. In mild and moderate DK, you don't even have to start them on infusion. If the child is tolerating orally, you can still manage them with oral fluids. If the child is otherwise okay, you can monitor them. You can stay bedside. You can still start them on subcutaneous. Not all DKAs need IV fluids. Not all DKAs need IV infusion of insulin, which means if you can monitor the child, you can manage them with subcutaneous. In facilities where you do not have a monitoring equipment, you can be bedside and give subcutaneous insulin, probably rapid analogs 0.3 units per kg initially, followed by 0.1 unit every hour or 0.15 to 0.2 every 2 hours till the DKA resolution, whatever criteria we said. Once your blood glucose becomes low, then probably you can reduce it, continue every hour 0.05 units. This is the alternate option. Currently, COVID guidelines have come where you don't have to have ICU setting to treat DKA, where your ICUs are full with patients, where you don't have bed in ICUs. You can still manage mild, moderate DKAs in the facilities where you can monitor itself. You just need a good nursing and monitoring facility, that's all. You don't need to have an ICU. But if they are hemodynamically compromised, shocked children, children with DKA, altered sensorium, probably those children are the ones who still need ICU care. And I said don't run behind numbers, just a few minutes for these numbers. Sodium, it will be low, spurious hyponatremia. You always correct it. For every 100 milligrams above 100, your sodium will fall by 2. So if your sugar is 600, 500 is more. So probably add 10 to the sodium. 135 is your measured sodium. Don't worry, it's plus 10, 145. As you are treating, look at sodium rise. That's why we said 4th hourly electrolytes, you look at the sodium rise, which means you are on the right track. If your sodium is not rising, probably you are loading the child with too much of fluids. Go back and calculate your fluids. Probably something wrong in our calculation in the middle of the night. So adjust the fluids. Your sodium correction should be optimal. Potassium, yes, initially it will be high, but total body potassium will be low. Always start with supplement. 40 or 30 or 20 depending upon the initial potassium. If it is more than 5.5, you don't start them in the initial 1 to 2 hours, but that doesn't mean the entire infusion you will go without potassium. Maybe after 2 to 3 hours, you please start them on potassium. It needs ECG monitoring. Bicarb, I think we can forget this slide because we don't give bicarb. Bicarb is very, very rarely given unless your pH is less than 6.9. Before ventilating, don't give them bicarbs because they cannot excrete. It will cause paradoxical metabolic acidosis. CNS acidosis will worsen. So please don't start them on bicarb just because your bicarb is 2 or 3 or 4. The only indication for bicarb is probably when somebody has hyperkalemia as a part of hyperkalemia therapy and refractory shock, you think child's myocardium is not responding due to severe acidosis, do not give them bicarb. And this does not hold good in children with acute kidney injury in DKA. There you have to give them bicarbs and the protocol is different. So except for these 3 indications, there is no role for bicarb. So better say no to bicarb. Monitoring, the most important part of DKA is monitoring, bedside monitoring. You have to stay bedside. You have a dengue child, you stay bedside. You have a DKA child also, you stay bedside. The children recover so nicely when you give bedside care. Why to monitor and what to monitor? See, because you need to monitor them for recovery. And the one complication which is behind you is cerebral edema, which will be silently coming along with DKA management. Unless you recognize early, the outcome is very bad. What to monitor? Yes, you don't need any gadgets. Bedside monitoring of your vital signs. Yes, rapid cardiopulmonary assessment is the only thing you need when you want to assess the children for monitoring. Lab monitoring, yes, you need to have something. Not always you can do everything clinically. So lab monitoring also you need to do. Cardiopulmonary assessment, yes, a small rise in the heart rate, respiratory rate, blood pressure, that will give a clue. So look at the trend of events. Don't look at one value. One value does not give any information. Every 4 hours, every 2 hours, every 3 hours, what has changed? My BP has changed slowly over 3 hours. My heart rate has changed over 3 hours. My respiratory rate has changed over 3 hours. That is an early finding for cerebral edema. Unequal pupil hypertension, my staff will say cerebral edema. I don't have to be there. My staff will say, Madam, BP high, bradycardia poiduchi, the cerebral edema. You will have to pick up before that triad comes in. So a minimal rise in the, initially they can have even tachycardia, not bradycardia. Then probably bradypnea and a small rise in the blood pressures. That is the time you have to pick up, reduce your fluids, avoid probably stimulation. The outcome is good. Once they develop florid cerebral edema, there's no point in beating it. And please do not run for a CT. It's a clinical diagnosis. If your child is not responding for your therapy, then probably you work for a CT. Otherwise, please don't plan for a CT. So clinical assessment is the gold standard. Then probably IO chart. Saturation, ECG, yes, potassium will be going up and down. Blood glucose initially hourly, then probably after your subcutaneous insulin, you can shift it to 4th hourly. Electrolytes ABG 4 to 6 or 8th hourly depending upon the severity of acidosis. And initial sample will require an ABG. Don't poke the artery every time. Venous blood gas is very, very good, equally enough. So don't try to poke the artery every time. First sample, you need the PCO2s to prognosticate. So you need an ABG. Otherwise, go ahead with a venous sample or a capillary sample. Urea creatinine 12th hourly. So what do you expect? This is what you expect. Blood sugar should go down plus, but do not go below 200. Sodium should keep increasing as you are correcting your glucose. Potassium from high potassium should come down. Bicarb should increase. Acidosis should decrease. Anion gaps should become narrow. Urea creatinine, which is high prerenal, should become normal. Blood ketones, which is initially high, should become less than 1. Total counts, which are high due to stress, will come down. Hematocrit, which is high due to hemoconcentration, will come down. So these are the trend of events. Anything is misfiring in this, that gives a clue for a complication. So as you are monitoring, yes, decline of blood glucose, acidosis is resolved, yes, give a clap for yourself, you are on the right track. If acidosis is persistent, you are in trouble. So if glucose levels decline, improving pH, good. If your pH is declining, please think of associated sepsis, AKI, or inadequate resuscitation. If blood glucose is high, first thing is check your insulin. Freshly prepare an insulin. See whether it is delivered. Despite that, if your glucose is not falling, you are in trouble. Maybe sepsis, AKI, then probably look into it where you need modification about the protocol. Child on treatment is worsening, suddenly developing headache, vomiting, irritability, not all this, any one of this. You know what the complication is? Maintain ABC, restrict fluids, get down to 50 to 60% of whatever you have calculated. IV mannitol, yes, hypertonic saline. As PGs, we were using mannitol. Subsequently, in ICU, we started using hypertonic saline. Now, evidence says mannitol may be better than hypertonic saline. We do not know. But most of the centers use hypertonic saline. There may be a marginal benefit with mannitol, but now when they come to you late with shock, probably you cannot use mannitol. Probably hypertonic saline is preferred. Marginally may have a benefit. If you give mannitol, probably there's no response. The second dose could be hypertonic saline. If you give hypertonic saline, there's no response, then probably you can use mannitol. Both are now recommended. And give one dose. If there's no response, repeat it within 1 or 2 hours. Because if it's cerebral edema, you need to be very aggressive initially. Then probably controlled ventilation. Don't ever plan to intubate a child with cerebral edema without drugs, because you'll be doing more harm with all spikes of ICPs if you don't properly use them as drug assisted or RSI. Next complication, altered sensorium, child on therapy, could be due to hypoglycemia, maybe into 5 to 6 hours of therapy. Rapid fall, not necessarily 70, 60. From 400 to 200, the child may have hypoglycemic symptoms. Stop insulin infusion, start dextrose with a higher concentration after bolusing with 10 or 25%. And then probably you identify why the child went into hypoglycemia. Was it some dosing problem, or is it something to do with the fluids or something else? And then probably restart insulin and check the cause of hypoglycemia. Hypoglycemia vandirchen, don't stop and go away, because child will need recovery, and you might initiate insulin immediately later. So immediately after 1 hour. So please don't go away just because it is hypoglycemic. Altered sensorium in DKA, shock, cerebral edema, severe acidosis, hypoglycemia, dysalkyltemia, especially your phosphates. Please have a watch on the phosphates. CVT, TTP, mucormycosis with bleeding and all that. These are little rare in the order. So if somebody asks what is the cause of altered sensorium, don't start from here, start from there. Persistent acidosis, I said insulin dose, fluid resuscitation. Check whether you have resuscitated properly, because dehydrated children and shocky children will have insulin resistance. They won't respond to your insulin. Suddenly when you hydrate them, the rapid insulin fall will precipitate cerebral edema. So please be very careful in fluids. Then calculated fluids, check whether you have given adequate fluids. See whether there is sepsis, or it could be hyperchloremic acidosis, non-anion gap acidosis, establishing renal failure, or sometimes drug overdose like salicylates. Other complications, little uncommon, hypokalemia, hypophosphatemia, or hyperchloremic acidosis, pulmonary edema, sepsis. Please start them on antibiotics early when you have a suspicion. So blood ketones is a point of care testing. Fever in DK has a poor prognosis, needs antibody at the emergency room. Insulin, please don't go beyond 0.1 units per kg unless indicated. Hypertonic saline in cerebral edema or 3%, your mannitol is equally good. Hypotensive shock, sepsis, renal failure, and cerebral edema are nightmares, where usually you don't get the expected results in children with DKA. What is recent? Yes, beta-hydroxybutyrate. You can use it bedside versus bicarbonate. Fluid therapy, yes, you can use either NS or half NS. Insulin 0.05 or 0.1 unit per kilo. Role of antibiotic when you have fever, refractory shock, or obvious focus of infection. Please look for a focus of infection. It may be a small boil inside the oral cavity. It may be a small paronychia or cellulitis, pneumonia. Skin and soft tissue infections are the common focus. That is followed by probably pneumonia and then probably other infections. Those two are the common ones. So always take an X-ray chest. When to suspect sepsis? Whenever there is fever. Fever always indicates infection in DKA. Like children with liver failure, fever always indicates, uremic children, fever always indicates infection. So this is one such state. Or hypothermia, both. Hypotensive shock, persistent acidosis, lactates are very high. Anion gap more than 35 is not only contributed by your ketones, it could be due to lactate as well. Prevention of DKA, yes. All these years we have been treating DKA, but I don't think we have come down with the mortality of DKA in developing countries. So probably the best thing to reduce mortality is prevention, which means in a naive diabetic, prevent DKA. Diagnose them when they are not decompensating. In a known diabetic, probably compliance, manifestations or no intercurrent infection management, pump failures, all those things will help. So DKA is a preventable healthcare failure. Mortality is 0.1 to 1%, not applicable to us. It's in Western literature. Ours is still high, ranging from 1 to 13% in developing nations. Probably cerebral edema, renal failure, and infections are the cause of mortality. BSPAD guidelines in 2020, a little change. Where to treat 16 to 18 years. This plus, if you are in an adult facility, treat in adult facility. If the child comes to a pediatric facility, treat in a pediatric facility. Categorize them as mild, moderate, severe. Earlier, BSPAD did not have this classification. And in DKA criteria was 18 for them, now it is 15. Bolus up to 40 ml per kilo, yes, don't reduce. Deficit plus 48 hours, over 48 hours plus maintenance per hour is actually a classification given in BSPAD. If there is no shock, no bolus, fluids as per ISPAD. Fluids now, BSPAD used to give 50% of fluids like ISPAD. But now both the guidelines have come, they say now fluid resuscitation is the treatment for DKA. And maximum weight, I think I said 80 kg or 97th percentile, whichever is lower. Insulin 0.05 unit is very good. Caution on potassium content and continue long-acting insulin if already on. These are some of the changes which we had in BSPAD 2020. During COVID-19, a word on this. If your ICU has no facilities to put in a DKA child, you can still have it in a non-ICU setting. You can use subcutaneous insulin, but not in complicated DKA or infants or under 2 years. So IM insulin, which we have been saying as no, has been recommended if you have no facilities to give IV in a child who has a poor perfusion. Poor perfusion, you give, try to IV only. If facilities are not there, you want to transport, better than giving subcutaneous, you can use IM. So the reference is available. If somebody says IM insulin, it is still possible. That's a last option. Aspart and Lispro are approved for use second hourly. Regular insulin also you can use fourth hourly. But monitoring and other guidelines are the mainstay in therapy. In COVID resource settings, I think this is what I said. So recognition, high degree of suspicion is important. Better to manage if they are decompensated in ICU setting. Volume resuscitation is only in shock, otherwise don't bolus them. Beyond 40 ml, please take on early inotropes. Begin fluids first, no hurry for insulin. Monitoring clinically and with labs. Bicarb, please forget about bicarb. Clinically monitoring is not only for how you are going about, also for looking for complications. I think last word is prevention is better. If you want to have something updated, these are some guidelines which you have. And I think 2018 is the latest we are expecting in the next 1 or 2 years in ISPAD. BSPAD, they have almost come close to ISPAD guidelines, so not much of a difference. And this 2020 is for COVID-19, just to know where you treat children with DKA. Thank you. If there are any questions, I'll take it up.